The event was billed as a celebration of my retirement, but I think the word I feel more comfortable with is a reflection, and not just on my retirement, but on the work you all and I have done at CUNY over the last many years. I suggest the word reflection, both because I'm not sure there is so much to celebrate these days, given the state of the world, and because I am sure that those in the room today have the collective experience, the smarts, and the backgrounds that we can together figure out what comes next in public health, in higher education, in CUNY, in the School of Public Health, and in New York City today. So I invite you on this occasion and beyond, whether, like me, you've been here at CUNY for more than 40 years, or whether you came at the beginning of this semester, to join us to begin a discussion looking at the successes, the limitations, and the future of the various enterprises that we've all been part of. To be sure, there are many things to celebrate. The community health program at Hunter College that I graduated from with my bachelor's and taught in for 35 years was first established at Hunter College in the early 1970s. The CUNY School of Public Health, where I've been since 2015, is about to celebrate its 10th anniversary. And these two programs and others have trained uh, thousands of health professionals who have helped New York City to confront and, in some cases, overcome the public health challenges. A really inspiring contribution to New York City. And CUNY, which will mark its 200th anniversary just 13 years from now, has been an engine of social mobility for New York City, moving people out of poverty and providing an entry into higher education for so many New Yorkers. I'm proud to have been part of these institutions with all of you, and I look forward to observing your continued successes in the years to come. But we also have to acknowledge how much we have not accomplished. Socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, gender, and other gaps in health have been growing in New York City, not shrinking. And together, we need to figure out how to reverse these disturbing and alarming trends. Here at CUNY, about half of the people who matriculate in degree programs at one of our 25 campuses fail to graduate, thus losing the lifetime health, social, and economic benefits of a college degree. And in the coming years, I fear that both our national public health and our higher education systems will be subject to relentless attacks that challenge scientific evidence, academic freedom, and our obligation to serve the public rather than special interests. For me, I hope that my retirement after 44 years at CUNY can give me some opportunities to spark ongoing discussions with all of you of where we've come from and where we're going. I've asked a few people I've worked with over the years to speak about some of these things that I've done over the years and they have done, and the lessons we've learned from those experiences, and we'll turn to them in a few minutes. But I invite each of you today and in the weeks and months to come to take a step back from the pressures of final exams, dissertations, grant applications that we each have piled on our plates, to ask where those of us committed to public health are going in the months and years to come. Like many of you, I've been caught up in the daily barrage of tasks, demands, and deadlines, and often have felt too busy to ask where we're going. But my pledge for myself and my request for you, whether you're retiring now or 50 years from now, is to take a few steps back and to ask where public health, New York City, this country, CUNY, and this school are going, and to ask what you and all of us together can do to get to a better place. I'm convinced that business as usual, doing tomorrow what we did yesterday, is not going to get us out of our current situation. And let me suggest a few directions that I think warrant consideration based on my own experience and my professional experience, and you might have other ideas to add to the list. Over the years, I've taught more than 4,000 undergraduate, master's, and PhD students at CUNY. I've learned from every one of them. And you all, many of you here today, have provided me with an education on life in New York City, our health, public health, and healthcare, and our healthcare system. Your professional, personal, and academic triumphs have sustained and inspired my work at CUNY. Thank you all so much for educating me. I owe you so much. But what if the CUNY School of Public Health and CUNY more broadly could become the educational institution that charted a new approach to pedagogy? What if we became the place that showed how to extract prior life experience of our students, the history and culture of their families and communities, and pair that with the knowledge, skills, and competencies that our faculty teach, and that will enable our students to change the world? That's a very different model than the pedagogy of mainstream higher education and public health or in other disciplines, still so based on what Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator, called banking education, in which professors believe we have to fill empty minds. We could be different. A second challenge is for us to consider to make CUNY the institution, the university that will ensure that no student fails to graduate because they are hungry, unstably housed, or lack access to healthcare or mental health services. You'll hear in a few minutes about one of our efforts to create such a program. We call it CUNY Cares. Imagine if not 50%, but 80% or 90% of those who entered CUNY did graduate, what benefits they would bring to themselves, their families, their communities, and New York City. I hope some of you will have ideas about how we can make CUNY Cares not a boutique demonstration project, but standard practice here at CUNY and in universities around the country. The final question I want to raise for your consideration is how the CUNY School of Public Health and CUNY can define a role in protecting public health and public higher education in the years to come. We have so many assets: our students, our faculty, our staff, our history, so much passion. And yet, so many of us today are afraid, depressed, considering hibernation for the next 4 years. I don't yet have answers for what we need to do, but as someone who's been through hard political times before, I know we must do something. I know that figuring this out together rather than separately will make our response much stronger and more effective. And as I move towards retirement, I hope each of you can think carefully about what you and I and our school can do in the coming months and years to confront these threats to public health and higher education, among other things. Switching to another note, many of you have asked what's next for me. Come January, I'll be working on 3 projects that have long absorbed me. I'm finishing a book that analyzes the successes and limitations of health activist movements in New York City since the 1970s. Some of you already heard about or read early drafts. Fighting for Health and Social Justice in New York City will be out in early 2026, and I hope many of you will read it and tell me what you think. Second, I've been working for the last couple of decades and will continue for at least the next couple of years to develop new strategies to improve the health of CUNY's 240,000 students, helping them to meet the health and social challenges that can undermine their academic successes. My colleague Rachel Stephenson will tell you more about CUNY Cares in a few minutes. She leads that effort. Finally, I'll continue my work with the World Health Organization's Working Group on the Commercial Determinants of Health, a term used to describe corporate and business impacts on health. Much of the focus to date has been on the tobacco, fossil fuel, food, pharmaceutical, alcohol, and firearms industries. But scholars are showing growing interest in documenting the health impact of the banking, real estate, private equity, and tech sectors. I'm on the editorial advisory committee for a report that WHO will be releasing in 2025 on the global status of commercial determinants of health, an effort to assist ministries of health and public health professionals and activists from around the world to take action to mitigate harmful corporate influences on health, influences which I believe today pose the greatest threat to human and planetary health our world faces today. I'll have to see if these projects are enough to keep me out of trouble. I also plan to spend some time hanging out, traveling, and discussing politics with my partner Wendy and my son Sasha. More time reading mysteries. Can I up my dose to beyond 2 a week? I hope so. And spending more time in the woods and on the water, lifetime pursuits of mine. Check in with me in 6 or 12 months to see how that's going. I'd now like to introduce my colleagues and turn it over to them. Stanley Richards is the president and CEO of the Fortune Society. Fortune is a leading New York City organization that helps those with justice involvement to rebuild their lives through service and advocacy. Stanley has spent more than 2 decades with the Fortune Society. He's also worked as deputy commissioner for the New York City Department of Correction, and as a young man, spent time in the New York State prison system. I met Stanley more than 25 years ago when he came to work with me as project director of HealthLink, a program my colleagues and I created at Rikers Island to support the reentry of people leaving jail for Harlem or the South Bronx. By working with people while they were in jail and for a year after they got out, we assisted them to find jobs, return to school, and get the health care they needed. By providing this support, we hope to keep participants out of the path of HIV, drugs, and a return to jail. Stanley was my mentor and my guide to learning how jails work and how to engage with people in jail and after release in ways that could make a difference in their lives. I also had the pleasure of having Stanley in some of my public health classes, where he again helped to educate his classmates and me about the complex back and forth pathways between jails and communities. I've asked Stanley to talk today about some of the work we did together and what we learned from them. The second speaker, Emma Tsui, is an associate professor in the CUNY School of Public Health, Community Health and Social Sciences program. For the 15 plus years that I've known Emma, she's taught me how to think differently about pedagogy, about community-based participatory research, and about engaging the subjects of public health research as actors in shaping our research questions, collecting evidence, and sharing our findings. Emma first came to CUNY to work with me as a postdoctoral fellow in 2010, and soon became a faculty member at Lehman and then here at the School of Public Health. We've written together, taught together, supervised doctoral students together, and of course, gossiped together about the School of Public Health. I've asked Emma to talk about some of our shared work and what we learned from that, and Emma will also moderate the discussion after we hear from the three speakers. And finally, Rachel Stephenson is the Chief Transformation Officer of CUNY, a position based in the CUNY Chancellor's Office. Her amazing title communicates only some of her amazing skills. She's a proficient manager, a tough-on-nails negotiator, an expediter who can bring diverse constituencies together. And as the chancellor once told me, Rachel gets shit done. And in my view, that's the highest praise anyone at CUNY can get. I first met Rachel in 2013 when she was running the CUNY Service Corps, a program that placed CUNY students in community organizations, including some in community placements that we were sponsoring here at the CUNY School of Public Health. In 2019, just before the pandemic started, the CUNY provost asked Rachel and me to chair a group of faculty members, staff, and students from the Bronx campuses to plan a new venture now called CUNY Cares. In June 2023, the current chancellor asked Rachel to lead CUNY Cares for his office, a move that enabled us to grow in leaps and bounds. For the last year and a half, Rachel and I have worked together to move CUNY Cares, which helps to promote the health of the 25,000 students in the three Bronx campuses to meet their needs for food, housing, healthcare, and mental health. Rachel has been an essential partner for translating the vision of CUNY Cares into a reality, helping them to overcome barriers, raise money, bring people together, enlist my city officials, and more. And I've asked her to talk about our work to meet student needs. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stanley.
May I ask the audience please to take seats? Thank you. I know the bowls of Mandarin are very magnetic.
Right. Now the mic is on. Thank you. Uh, when I got the email invitation to come and share some thoughts about working with Nick and the work that we've done together, um, I was sort of taken back because Nick is so humble in everything that he does. It has never been about what he does. Even in the statements, it's always been about what we have done, the collective us. And to be able to come and share my experiences with you, Nick, is a deep, deep honor for me. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you for allowing me to come here and to share my experiences with you. As Nick said, Nick and I worked together for about 25 years. We started doing this work on a project called HealthLink. And at that time, we had Commissioner Marty Horn, who was the commissioner of the New York City Department of Corrections, and we had Commissioner Linda Gibbs, who was the commissioner of the Department of Homeless Services. And they came together and sort of said, we need to rethink how we are working in silos and try to come together to work in partnership. It was at the same time we was doing the HealthLink project, which was testing the theory about if you work with people while they're inside, develop a relationship with them, connect with their family, make sure when they get out, you reduce any transitional barriers for them to get treatment, housing, school, health, that you increase the likelihood that they will be engaged in the community and desist from engaging in crime. And so we launched this project, and Commissioner Horn and Commissioner Gibbs launched the New York City Discharge Planning Collaboration, trying to really expand the way in which HealthLink was doing that work on Rikers Island. And when they brought together nonprofits, city government leaders, and they was talking about how do we bring resources into the facilities to help people not come back. They was thinking about it from their own lens. They was thinking about it as the Department of Correction commissioner, as Marty Horn says, used to say, he says, I need to empty 2 housing areas in order to begin to save money. And Linda was saying, I need to make sure people are housed so I don't have to have them in shelters and I could reduce my shelter population. Lo and behold, Nick comes in and Nick addresses the entire group. And he says, when we think about this, we need to think about this in terms of, and I'll never forget when you said this is a wicked problem. And wicked problems mean there are many points of origin. And if we only tackle one point, we're going to miss the boat on the others. And we need to think about how do we use this opportunity to engage people while they're incarcerated to really get them connected and stayed connected to services. And so he fundamentally shifted the way all of us was thinking about discharge planning and reentry to really thinking about how do we make sure that people are connected to the resources. And the resource that we were trying to get people connected to that many people don't know, when someone goes into Rikers Island, they get incarcerated. If they're on public assistance and Medicaid, back in the day, their Medicaid used to get terminated. If they was in there for a week, a month, 2 months, it would get terminated. Then it would require them, when they get released, to go back down to the public assistance office, reapply for their Medicaid, all the while That prevents them from getting into drug treatment because if you don't have Medicaid, you can't pay for your drug treatment. You can't go see a doctor. You can't get your prescriptions. And Nick was saying, how do we change that? How do we really think about changing the way the system is working that increases the likelihood that people are going to continue to come back? And that was something we started working on. And today, it's different. Today, Medicaid is not terminated, it's suspended. Today, as a result of those conversations, Nick, Fortune has a program called Care Management, where we literally go into jails and prisons and work with people when they're coming home, making sure that they have their doctor's appointments set up, making sure that they're connected to drug treatment, making sure they have housing. Because the way we approach it can't be just about we have to get people connected to a job. We have to make sure people are connected to healthcare. We need to make sure people have access to their benefits and resources. And so from that early work, Nick, we really transformed the way people, social service providers like Fortune, government leaders think about what we do with people who are really vulnerable and in need of intensive services and care. And so we have been growing that and we have been doing that work all because Nick, you called us to not think about what the silo was telling us, but to think about what the system was telling us. And I remember in one of your classes, you used to say, if you only focus on the individual level, that's the result you're going to get. If you only focus on the community level, that's the result you're going to get. If you only focus on the system level, you have to focus on all three of them. And so part of our model at Fortune, part of the model that we developed in our early days of the discharge plan and collaboration, the early resources development we did with HealthLink is all fundamental in how we work today. And I always say to people, we can look at what's happening in this state, half glass half full, half empty. I tend to look at half full. And here's why. When we started doing that work in New York State, there was 72,000 people incarcerated in New York State prisons. There was over 150,000 people going through New York City jails. There was 22,000 people incarcerated in New York City jails. Today, fast forward, we have a lot of work to do. We have not arrived. We still have some system work to do. We still have some individual community work. But here's where we're at. 33,000 people incarcerated in New York State prisons. We closed 12 New York State prisons and plan to close more. 6,500 people incarcerated in New York City jails. We have come some way. We have made progress because we are thinking about the system not as an isolated entity, but as a collective. How do we address the collective? And so while we have a lot of work to do, Nick, I salute you for challenging us and pushing us to always think about not the what's right in front of us, but to think long distance about how we make a difference in people's lives. And I want to thank you for being a mentor and a friend to me. We have worked together for a long time, Nick, and I have never got rejected by you. You have never said, I'm too busy, Stan, I can't talk right now. Like you've never done that. You've always been available. And whenever I talk with you, like when we had dinner, the great thing I love about you is you're always thinking like in 3D. You're like, okay, Stan, what about if we did this? And what about and that inquisitiveness allows for someone to be free, for someone to think outside the box, and you create those conditions. And so I want to end my part with a poem that I think resonates for me about you, how I feel about you. So I'm gonna just give me a second. I want to share it. And it's a poem from a woman who is in recovery. Her name is Melody Beatty, and it's called Gratitude. Gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and more. It turns denial into acceptance, chaos to order, confusion into clarity. It could turn a meal into a feast, a house into a home, a stranger into a friend. Gratitude makes sense of our past, brings peace for today, and creates a vision for tomorrow. Nick, I have so much gratitude for you. This poem speaks about you.
Hello, everyone. Is this says it's on?
You can give her your mic.
Um, Hi, it's such an honor and a pleasure to get to celebrate Nick, my dear mentor and collaborator of many years, as he noted before. And you heard him saying he really asked us to speak about our collective work and to raise questions. And I will say that as a mentee, I want to do what he's encouraging me to do. But as an admirer, I feel like I have to talk about him a little bit as well. So as he said, I initially came to CUNY to work with Nick as a postdoc in 2010. I had read Nick's work and I knew him to be a thought provoking thinker and writer, and a person whose work was deeply engaged with many of the urgent questions of our world at that time. Questions about incarceration and health, about food systems and corporations and intersectoral partnerships, and ultimately about how we improve health for those most marginalized by existing systems. These are questions that I too was invigorated by, but I wondered what academia could really do to shift these landscapes. I was fresh out of PhD school, and I held a pretty caricatured view in my mind of what academic life might look like. And I will say that visiting Nick's expansive office at the Brookdale campus for the first time, I looked around and I thought, check. There were several lifetimes worth of books in bookcases on all of the walls, and any surface that was not covered with books was covered with papers. But as we all well know, that office was only the tiniest corner of Nick's professional solar system. In my early weeks on the job, Nick did several things that immediately changed my picture of what academic life could be. First, he held a press conference around the release of a report, impressing on me the importance of writing for a broader audience than peer review and of translating and communicating his team's research into discussion and action. He highlighted a few facts and findings of the report, but truly placed emphasis on arguing his points vigorously, questioning systems, suggesting alternatives. The forceful tone of his voice that day stayed with me, and I think you heard it again a few moments ago when he was speaking. Second, he invited me to join a group conducting a community based participatory research project on food insecurity with young people in the Bronx. In meetings for that project, which involved many subway rides and many partners, the DOHMH, the DOE, a high school, after school programs, I heard a very different voice from Nick, one more focused on listening, exchange, conversation, and the evolution of ideas. Third, one day Nick moved our regular check in meeting from Brookdale to the CUNY Graduate Center. Why? We needed to go to McDonald's. What? I followed his lead. We turned a corner and I saw that Nick was taking a break from the office to join in an early Fight for 15 protest. A tall figure chanting loudly alongside a small crowd of activists who would ultimately win this important minimum wage standard. I joined in, fascinated and relieved that this too could be what academia looked, sounded, and felt like. Um, And so the questions that this early period raises for me, which I still grapple with, are how do we find the right balance of the work that we do with data and the work that we do to translate and act on what we have learned from that data? What is the nature of that action oriented work, and what partners within and outside of public health, within and outside of academia, do we need to do this work now? Working with Nick in that capacity as a postdoc was like joining a public health circus, but not a 3-ring one, a 10-ring one, or a 20-ring one. We juggled many projects and collaborations, and in doing so, I watched Nick engage repeatedly in his characteristic firm but gentle way, never letting convenience win out over our mission. This could be frustrating at times and exhausting occasionally. But the lesson was not lost on me: values over convenience. In 2016, we both moved here to CUNY SPH's new home and became colleagues, and I would say professional family, in the Community Health and Social Sciences department. From this vantage point, I got to witness how Nick's genially pushy activist spirit works as a lever within an institution. One of the many areas to which Nick has brought this spirit in recent years is teaching, which he gestured at earlier. We didn't coordinate our talks. As professors, and I think many people in this room know, teaching is a huge part of our role, but too often it exists on the periphery where good enough is good enough. The COVID-19 pandemic did two things. One, it rapidly moved more of our courses online and into the realm of often asynchronous teaching. And two, it markedly ratcheted up student and faculty stress as we not only lived the pandemic and the movements for racial justice in our different ways, but also worked to monitor and mitigate these ruptures and their effects. In response, in fall 2020, a group of us here at the school, Nick among us, began to gather regularly to talk about teaching through what we dubbed the Anti-Racist Teaching Collaborative. We read about techniques that would help us to meet the moment in the classroom. We practiced these, we shared our experiences, and we shared challenges. For many of us, this was the first professional space we'd experienced that was dedicated to pedagogy. Week by week, we taught and learned from each other. I've struggled to find the right words to describe what was so special about that time. Recently, a conversation between two poets, two of my favorite poets, Ross Gay and Nikki Finney, reminded me of the word permeable, which I think applies here. In that group, we learned ways to remain or become permeable to what was taking place around us, to help each other carry those experiences and sorrows, and to try to teach into them with all that that requires. In theory, Nick had perhaps the least to gain of all of us as a distinguished professor and a celebrated instructor in a later stage of his career. But he showed up each time, driven by a sense of urgency, his heart in it fully, his thinking permeable. In the second year of the COVID-19 pandemic, a small oral history project grew out of this work. During one of these oral history interviews, a doctoral student named Sherry Jardine, who's here today, shared a story about Nick that has stayed with me. Sherry described coming into a course Nick was teaching, exhausted by leading a major COVID healthcare effort all spring and summer of 2020. She said, I had really given up on public health in a country that holds this myth of American exceptionalism, and we are last in every population health indicator in the world. As a Black woman, the pervasiveness and persistence of racism was ever present for her, and she recalled going into the course with Nick thinking, this oppressive system is never going to end. Over the course of the semester, she described how Nick's classroom re-engaged her with the idea that, quote, we have to think about drivers of these inequities and we have to think about creative solutions. to not only engage people that think like us, but to align people who do not think like us to our side. That's the only way we're going to make progress. On Sherry's final paper, Nick included a comment further encouraging her ability to think outside of what she called the confines of the field. He wrote, like the queen in Alice in Wonderland, I want you to imagine 6 impossible things before breakfast. Sherry described feeling exhilarated by this encouragement to be creative and dream of radical solutions in the face of adversity. In the interview, she concluded, I was like, this is it. This is public health education, restoring hope when hope is lost. I love this story, not only because it shows how a good classroom experience can help pull someone out of burnout and cynicism, but also because I know that I and others have had similar experiences with Nick that have helped us to find energy and hope. When a room falls silent because we are out of ideas for ways forward, I realize I am buoyed by knowing that Nick is likely to venture into that silence with the phrase, to my mind, his is a voice bringing an appreciation of history, a long view of time, and he applies that to remind us of how to find energy and keep going when we feel, in his words, dispirited. Since that time, Nick has been a forceful voice in the school for the importance of teaching, especially maintaining and cultivating in person and synchronous teaching so that the kinds of experiences with Sherry can happen in real time. The final questions that this raises for me are, how do we stay closely connected to our teaching mission and to our students as more courses take place online and asynchronously? How do we stay permeable? How do we keep learning ourselves to create active and responsive learning environments? How do we incentivize excellent, caring, and inspiring teaching? And finally, how do we keep ourselves and our amazing students motivated in trying times as we work in realms shaped by the structural and the systemic? Thank you, Nick, for all of that inspiration, and I'll pass the mic to Rachel.
These are some gorgeous testimonials, and you deserve them all. Um, I too did not 100% comply with the assignment.
Someone else is there.
Um, I do think it speaks volumes that Nick asked us all to come to this panel today, talking about the collective work and the impact and all the questions raised and the implications for the future. And this I think is a testament to his humility, right? And the fact that he really does want to focus on all the people he's working to serve day in and day out. But I want to put out some framing words for some of the reflection I'm doing about my work with Nick. And these framing words include big ideas, advocacy, fearlessness, disruption, foresight, interrogation, relentlessness. So, as you've heard, Nick and I began our work together some years ago when he and I co chaired a working group that was convened by Vita Rabinowitz, who at the time was executive vice chancellor, maybe interim chancellor, one or the other. And our charge ultimately was to extract and apply lessons learned from Healthy CUNY uh, and create in partnership with our collaborators, faculty, staff, and students a model for meeting the health and social needs of CUNY students, right? So this was the beginning of the journey that has led us to the CUNY Cares demonstration project, which you've heard about a couple of times. And this, of course, is currently taking place at the 3 CUNY colleges in the Bronx. And I just want to acknowledge project director Hamilton here, and our housing specialist Arturo, and also members of the team who Patty Lamberson is in the room. Great to see Jenna and Holly and others who have contributed this important work. Amanda, I'm going to forget someone, but you're all here, and it's an incredible team. So along this journey, I just want to acknowledge, and this is the point about Nick navigating, systems, that he has ultimately inspired multiple leaders at the City University of New York So let's start with Vita Rabinowitz, who called us together. Then, of course, there was the Executive Vice Chancellor and University Provost Jose Luis Cruz. Then there was the Executive Vice Chancellor and University Provost Dan Lemons. Then there was Chancellor Felix Matos Rodriguez. All of these leaders saw something in Nick and his ability to ask bold questions and propose big solutions. And they identified Nick as a faculty member with a vision that could really transform how the university does its work. And I think the interesting thing here is this just wasn't about conceptual work, but they invited him in to help actually make something happen. Now, I listed a few names earlier, right? There were a whole string of leaders in these spaces. There's been some churn at the system office. And I have to acknowledge Nick's persistence. He's kept this conversation going about next steps over and over. And really, no matter who has had the power or who has been able to make decisions about resource allocation, et cetera, Nick has been laser focused on the students who need us. And the students who are juggling all the demands of their lives while pursuing their degrees. So Nick and I, this has happened I don't know how many times. So sit with me. Okay. So who's the character in the office now? Who's in charge? What are they like? What are they not like? How do we talk to them? How do we connect? And ultimately, he's kept showing up, making these connections, and getting these commitments. So, we're working now with a really great team of colleagues and collaborators from the School of Public Health, Bronx Community College, Ostos Community College, Lehman College, the central office, and a whole crew of external partners to test a model that could potentially be scaled across the university. Now, this is a model that relies on CUNY students serving as advocates and navigators for their peers. It has introduced CUNY's first ever housing specialist to our campuses. It engages faculty around students' essential needs. It promises to evaluate the work we are doing in the space more robustly than ever before. And in fact, we're really hoping that we can influence how CUNY ultimately measures its ethic of care goals, the ones that have been articulated in the Chancellor's strategic plan, through these efforts. It reimagines CUNY's relationship with partners like health and hospitals and HRA, and it dares to propose that every CUNY student will one day be assessed for benefits eligibility as part of routine financial aid screening and packaging. So, this is big, intense, messy, aspirational stuff, and Nick has dreamed it all up. He really has. Now, one of the things that I've really loved about working with Nick over the years is that he's very clear about his positioning within the university. And he and I have been partners in much of the work we've done together, but he always reminds me that unlike me, he is a faculty. And he has the responsibility to be an activist and to advocate for change and policy and practice and all the things. And he can do this fearlessly because he's not beholden to the university the way an administrator might be, right? He looks at the data, he elevates real need, he thinks about possible interventions, and he's not afraid to disrupt business as usual so that he and the rest of us can compel change. And so, we're here today to celebrate this incredible milestone in Nick's career. I can't believe it. I guess I have to accept it. And we are at this point only halfway through the CUNY Cares demonstration project in the Bronx. I know, of course, Nick has told us that he will continue to be engaged with this work, will continue to help shepherd this project and this team through major decision points on the horizon. I know with some limits to your time. Many people we know within weeks of a milestone like this are counting down, but what is Nick doing? As he has already demonstrated today, he's thinking, given his incredible foresight, he's anticipating potential new challenges that our students may face in our current political climate. And this has come up in both of the talks we've heard today, He continues to interrogate the CUNY Cares model. How do we need to adjust our priorities? What if we introduce this new partnership or this different intervention? Why don't we think about how an adjustment over here or a tweak over there may allow us to reach additional students? And I'm going to admit part of my job has been to pull things in and help us commit to a foundational model that ultimately we can run and evaluate. This has meant that at times we're putting in a pin in some of these incredible ideas. But I want to say to you, Nick, that I continue to be amazed by your ability to think well beyond the boundaries of what we have defined already, and ultimately, you know, spend your creative energy, do all of this intense questioning, be willing to push and push and push and push. And so ultimately, I think my contributions to this panel will land here. When Nick talks about raising questions for the future, what are the implications of our collective work? I just want to emphasize, Nick, that you have modeled all the things that we should be and the key to transforming this university, because you never stop thinking, because you're not satisfied with the status quo, because you leverage your experience on the data and the things you learn every day of your life to keep generating ideas. And if only all of us could have this kind of unrelenting curiosity and spirit. So I want to thank you for everything you've taught me and the incredible contributions you've made to this university.
Okay, so we have a few minutes to open it up to the group to take up anything that was talked about by Nick or by the panel.
Another 2 minutes.
or to
The dean ordered me up.
or to share your own experiences maybe that resonate with some of what was said. So we're delighted to hear from anyone.
Does this one work? Yeah, okay. Nick, first of all, I am I guess now former doctoral student of Nick's. Recently graduated and defended my dissertation with Nick as the chair of my committee. And 5 wonderful years of working alongside him, learning from him, and learning alongside my wonderful colleagues. And I think we're all sitting here today because of the impact that you've had on us in this, short period of time with respect to your very long and impactful career. And I think one of the biggest things I came into this PhD program really wanting to expand my knowledge, but not really sure where I was going to land in the workforce. Was really open to anything from academia to private sector, government, nonprofits, and I was really disenchanted with academia at the time. I think I really resonated with what Emma said, just kind of had this characterization of what academia looked like, but wasn't really informed. And along the way, I think really teaching alongside Nick, but also being a part of his courses showed me that academia can be something I didn't know it could be. Most of my career, I've been a part of classes that I think many of us have been in, where we sit and we listen and we take this knowledge in and we, in some way, show that we have digested this knowledge. And in Nick's class, it wasn't just about what he was bringing to the class, it was about what we were bringing to the class as well. And I learned so much from those classes, not just from Nick and everything that he's brought, but everything that my colleagues have brought as well. And that is something that is truly invaluable. I don't know that I've gotten that from another professor and any other time in my academic career. But also alongside that, I learned that in academia, you can also be an activist, you can also be an advocate, and you can lead fearlessly and have opinions and state those opinions without fear. And I think it really invigorated me to want to be more active in portions of both the school, but also our local community that really mattered. And I was part of Nick's class when the pandemic hit and we were forced to all transition to this weird uh, time where we were just not in person anymore when we were so accustomed to doing that. And it was like I'm sure everybody feels the same way. It was very difficult. It was a weird transition, and we weren't really sure how this was going to work or if it was going to work well. And I think it with somebody like Nick, it just felt almost seamless. We Class was as normal. Our discussions were, if anything, more rich because we were analyzing and looking at what was happening around us and thinking about what can we do from the place that we are right now. And third, I think at the end of my career, I have now been exposed to this broad spectrum view of what academia can look like. And I feel now more than ever that I want to be a part of this system. And it's something I never thought I would ever say. And it's not just something I think I'm saying because, it's a job and it's something to do and it's, you know, something that's well respected and something that I can have an impact on, but I really feel passionate about it. I really feel invigorated by your teaching, by, your friendship, by your mentorship. And um I feel so honored to have been your student, but to also have been lucky to be mentored by you and have you as the chair of my dissertation. You've pushed me more than I thought I could ever be pushed, and it has taken me places that I could never have dreamed of. And I am extremely grateful for you. I am extremely grateful for the work that you've done and for all that you have shown me and my colleagues. And I cannot wait to see all that you do. Others?
Thank you. So I'm going to try to follow the assignment and ask a big question and looking forward. Um, as someone who's been happily a colleague of Nick's for as long as I've been here at CUNY and attended a lot of faculty, department meetings, we've talked a lot as colleagues in the department about pedagogy. And I know that many of us here at the school have recently had to contend with um, pressure from the accrediting body, especially in our department, in Chaz, pushing back on what we thought were um, innovative or maybe not so innovative, but pedagogical approaches that better reflected the reality of public health work. And we thought that that was um, a good thing to espouse, given that we're working with students who want to work in the field. And, disappointingly, right, recently we've had to confront pushback. So I'm just wondering, maybe first from Nick and from others with thoughts about public health pedagogy, like w- what does that make you think about going forward? Because I feel like we were thinking multidisciplinary work and collaborative work and group, the 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 what is it? The sum of the parts is greater than the whole, or whatever that statement is. But um, I don't know. I think for me that was a bit depressing recently, and I'm interested in what a more positive, vision around that might be.
I think accrediting bodies reflect a mix of forces, and uh, on the one hand, they want to ensure that the people who graduate from our programs know what they need to know. That's a good thing, right? We want that too. But they're very bureaucratized organizations, and there's a kind of lowest common denominator approach. And my answer to everything is activism and social movements, or my answer to many things. And I think faculty, faculty younger than me, students, uh, have to take on Seth and have a dialogue. And I think it can be a constructive dialogue, although I think it also needs to be disruptive. I don't think those are in contradiction, to really rethink what are the standards, what are the competencies that students will need. What are the competencies that students will need in the next 4 years to defend public health and to defend science and truth? And I don't think Seth has thought through those questions in a structured way. So I think you and those of you who are staying here have your work cut out for you. And I think there are people in public health who want to do that work, and we should encourage them and create the spaces that that can happen.
Thanks, Diana. Other people who want to take up any of these questions or just chime in from your perspective? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for those wonderful presentations. And Nick, thank you so much for all of your work and congratulations. I remember in my first, the cities and public health class, Nick telling a story. I also am a former doctoral student and now a professor. I remember Nick telling a story about um, the uh, Linda, the effort when Medicare was passed to to desegregate hospitals, and it was a very Nick way of telling the story. He said Lyndon Baines Johnson told everyone in his administration, "I want you to go desegregate all the hospitals," and they went and did some things, and they came back and he said, "No, you didn't understand me. I want you to go desegregate all of the hospitals," and I teach that episode in, my health policy class, but I also, it's a thing that it's sort of a point of, a bunch of things coming together in terms of the crystallized my just, like, kind of set me on a path for the kind of professor I think I wanna be, which is, to look at how systems intersect with social determinants of health and health outcomes in a way that had been very abstract through a master's program and lots of time spent working in public health. And so I just am so grateful I got to be in a class with you and I got to participate in conversations with you, and thank you and congratulations.
I see a hand.
I started my master's in public health here at the beginning of the pandemic. And so my first and only class in person was a class with Nick, which ended in, what was it, in 2022, called Corporations, Democracy, and Public Health. And I so appreciated that class for helping me understand what the hell was happening in the country and the world. Um, and thinking about this event today, I was just thinking, God, what's coming up is like a worst case scenario of the distortion, you know, corporate influence on politics, and it's so scary to think about what's ahead. And so I came here partly with the prayer that there would be some light shed, some hope in terms of a couple, ways to think about moving forward, at the edge of what feels like an abyss. And so that's probably pie in the sky when we all don't know what's happening, but I have that wish. Mostly though, I wanted to thank you, Nick, for this wonderful class and your books, which has helped me understand what's happening so it doesn't seem so random. And so um, I would just say also that I like the class so much, I plan to give birth the day after the last class, which I didn't quite make it, but I did plan for that. She's now 2.5.
So I think we're going to switch back to food and hear some brief closing remarks. I wanted to say a couple things. First, I wanted to add my thanks to Marilyn. Marilyn, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be at this event and a pleasure to work with you for 40 years. So I'll have more to say about that at another event. And in answer to your question, I think I have hope for a couple reasons. One is having been through bad times before, as I said, and seeing that as a people, as a country, as a uh, as a enterprise, we got out of those times. And someone, I was giving a talk a few years ago, and someone who had just started work as a public health worker and that had some setbacks and asked, well, why should I stay in public health? I tried something and it didn't work. And what can you suggest that I do? And what I said to him is get old. And the point that I wanted to make is that I've seen from my 40 plus years that victories take a very long time. And that who would have thought that, you know, uh, gay rights would be as accepted, even though they too were under challenge? Who would have thought that we would be able to control tobacco use as much as we have? Who would have thought we could reduce the population at Rikers and jail? And those took years and decades of effort. And so the hope I offer you is we've done it before, we can do it again. And I hope that all of you will be part of figuring out in the very tough times ahead of us. No one can deny that, you know, uh, despair is a tool of those who want to maintain the status quo. And by insisting that we're not going to be foolishly optimistic, but that we're going to do what we can to do what so many people have done before us, which is make things better, improve human health, reduce inequities. And I really look forward to working with all of you to do that. And thank you all so much for coming today and listening.
Stay on stage. So this is the moment I was given for closing remarks. And I will tell you, as I said, my first experience with Nick was when I came for my interview for the deanship of this School of Public Health. And I went on and on about my NIH funding, about my work with USAID, blah, blah, blah. And then I mentioned a story about an activity I had with my students at GW in the Department of Prevention and Community Health, where I was the chairman. And some of my students came to me with the observation that in the wealthier neighborhoods of Washington, D.C., condoms were hanging on little hangers at the CVS, and anybody could just pick up a condom, go pay for it, and leave. But in other neighborhoods where there were the highest prevalence of HIV, condoms were locked behind a glass cabinet. Now it's everywhere like that. And so we started a campaign called Free the Condom Campaign. And we went to neighborhoods in Washington, D.C., where we carried banners, Free the Condom Campaign, Free the Condom Campaign, Free the condoms, free the... And he lit up. He said, yeah, this guy has some spunk in him. And at the end of the day, we were in the Washington Post, and actually CVS did free the condoms. So it was a success story. But it's very funny because I'm sorry that Susan Klitzman is not here today. But as you know, I came to the School of Public Health under rather a draconian administration. Can I say at Hunter College? Yeah, at Hunter College. And little did I know. I mean, I didn't know anything about all of this. I'd never heard of the dragon. Yeah. so, so I came in good faith, and I came because I felt like this city deserved a school of public health. That was a public school of public health. But when I approached the deanship, um, I had so many questions as, peeling the layers of CUNY as I went through the initial summer of getting ready. And Nick and Susan Klitzman were my informants. They gave me depth of understanding of how it could be such a successful venture of creating this school and how they would assist me. So it was very natural for me to assume that when I came, Nick would be my senior associate dean for academic affairs, and Susan would be my associate dean for administration. Little did I know. You remember what Rachel just said about Nick being dissatisfied, upset with the status quo, so proud to be a faculty. These were elements that were true to him to the deepest level, that he thought these administrative functions, would be a downgrade.
You we needed to go over there, and I didn't want to do it.
I know.
He did take it.
But as time went on, I understood. I understood that Nick, at the core of who he is a free spirit and an activist and an advocate. Everything else is woven around that. I would have loved to be your parent because that must have been an experience of a lifetime. But at the end of the day, I think Nick has learned one thing. He has learned that if he follows his compass and if he recruits his energy, which is indomitable, he's able to achieve things that other people are not able to achieve. You've impressed these people with your intelligence, but you've impressed me with your resilience and your tenacity and your belief in what is right. We need people like that. We are surrounded by fallacies, by alternative realities, by all sorts of expressions that defy the good sense of believing in what is right. There is such a thing. And Nick believes in it. And that is his magic dust. Because anybody that understands that there is something called right cannot help but stand with him and by him. And I knew today that he wasn't going to wear a tie, but I still wore my tie. Because as he said, he needed people like me to do the job. But it's important, even for people like me, to understand that people like him are the fuel that keeps things going. The fire, the wind, the light, the electricity. And for that, I will remain forever grateful, because without the light under my tush and the electricity through my spine and the wind that blows my hair off, I don't think the school would have ever been what it is today. I thank you for standing with me and behind me, and sometimes against me, but always for the right and for the good. Thank you, Nick. And now you can go back to what is left of the dinner and enjoy each other's company. This is a special moment in the history of this school. Thank you.